So the last, but not least, book is about the Netherlands, but seen from a point of view of the Americas, because it's Barbara de Vries, who is originally from Holland, but she lives for a very, very long time of her life. I think she left home at 18 or even earlier. She was a model, and so she had to travel the world. And she made a book about homecoming. It's an English book, which hopefully will be translated in Dutch at one point. She made a journey back to her country to meet amazing creators and architects and designers and lifestylers and people who gave a very new meaning to what it is to live and work, be with children in nature. And so she crafted that in this wonderful book, which was photographed and written by her. And so this is going to be our last event. And we are super happy to share a bit of the Netherlands, you know, the sort of the intimacy of the Netherlands with you through the eye of my friend, Barbara de Vries. And she's also our ambassador for the United States. Thank you, Barbara, and welcome. I heard you are online already almost the whole day. So you have been
yes,
inspired.
In and out.
Yeah.
The last one was so distracting for me because it's kind of like what I've been doing, and this is a new project. So I'm coming into this thinking about, you know, all the plastic stuff, and I'm even wearing in celebration of Thursday my beach plastic earrings, and half my studio behind me is my beach plastic studio, and then that's more of the writing studio. So it's interesting. It's like, you know, I feel right at home.
There's a lot of common, very radical thoughts today, so that's very nice.
Yeah, really fabulous.
So give us your insights.
I can start. Yes. So this book I started making about 3 years ago. Where are we? Yeah, 3 years ago, when my daughters and I went to the Netherlands for my mother's birthday, and it's her 90th birthday party. And soon thereafter, they started going to college in the Netherlands. And as they went to college in the Netherlands, I started seeing the country more through their eyes and started putting together, through a lot of research, a group of houses and more people than houses that I thought would tell a story about the Netherlands that might be very inspiring and needed in the United States at that time. So that is 3 years ago. So politically, we had a slightly different landscape. A lot of people felt that they had to start showing different perspectives during that time. So, you know, in that way, it was a good time because we all started pushing back. So I went back to the Netherlands, saw all the houses, scouted all the houses, then went back again. And as I went back again to shoot, and I had my shoot schedule set up, my photographer let me know that he couldn't come with me. So I was kind of in a bind, but, you know, that didn't stop me. I rented a good set of cameras and decided to do the shoot myself, which was probably kind of like one of those lucky accidents where the outcome is actually more personal because of it. And I got deeper into my subjects because I was really looking at their houses. I wasn't just visiting them and talking to them about it, but I was really, really looking at their houses. Then this book was supposed to come out 6 months ago. It just came out this month. It came out 6 months late because of COVID. So during COVID, my editor and I also had a lot of time to do more work on it, to really look at it. So I think with all this caring and all this kind of looking after this book and being into it, it became very polished, not in a bad sense, but just it got a lot of love and attention. This is what's called the end papers. So it just gives a feeling of what to expect inside the book. And they're also at the other end, which helps because most people pick up a book and flip it from back to front, which really annoys me, and I become quite bullyish when people do that. But that's how a lot of people initially look at a book. So I made the end papers the same, so that at least the beginning is the same in both places. So because we had the extra time, I also had time to embroider the entire alphabet, which you would see at this point, because the titles of each chapter are in embroidered font. My daughter is a graphic designer, so she created the font for me. And I am also going to then, it skips to the next few pages, and then it gets to the introduction, which I'm going to read. So there is the embroidered font that we made. I embroidered it, my daughter made it, a graphic tool. This is one of the houses, the quirky houses, and it's actually not a house, it's a boat. And it has a bathtub on the boat. This is my house, and what I found when I came back from my trip and seeing everybody was that, surprise, surprise, my own home was very, very similar in many Dutch ways as the homes that I'd been seeing and I'd been visiting. This is kind of to show you the similarity. This is my hallway, and this is Kiki and Joost's hallway. So I found that very comforting. Liedewij wrote a beautiful introduction and has spoken about how Dutch houses have a lot of staircases, and how staircases are really important. Maybe I can just write a little section for that. What all these spaces have in common, and what has been perfectly captured by Barbara's lens, are the staircases of the different houses. Even the boat has cute steps to sit on. But why is the staircase so prominent in Dutch architecture? Could it be that the Dutch reach towards the sky because they endeavor to make the most of limited space, using cellars for preserving fruits, attics for ateliers, and barns for celebration? Sometimes redesigned, often restored, and even recycled, stairs and ladders share the same linear elevating principle, guiding the eye to higher goals, a tool for ascension to elevated awareness. So that's a lovely take on the Dutch stair, and she's right. That again is my house, and I'm now going to read you my introduction, which will tell you a little bit about me and about why I wrote the book. Our Dutch windmill, de molen, was my father's wedding gift to my mother. When he died, not long after the renovation of his dream home was complete, I complemented the scant memories I had of him with memories of all the summers spent at our molen. It was the place where I felt free to create my own universe while I imagined him there, my father architect, romantic, inventive, and hopeful, building a new world for my mother and me. Coming Home is a peek inside the homes of 14 couples and individuals who live thoughtful, creative lives in reclaimed environments of their own making. I have tried to capture the meaning of gezellig, a unique word that is at the heart of being Dutch and almost impossible to describe in English. If it were a recipe, the ingredients would be equal parts of happy, cozy, fun, and belonging. I reconnected to being Dutch when Kiki and Leila, my twin daughters, started college in the Netherlands. The houses and lives featured on these pages are an evolution of where I left off when I moved from Amsterdam to London to study fashion design. To me, these homes and lives characterize the best of Dutch living. Without going deep into our national history, it's fair to say that we are a single-minded, outspoken, righteous, and practical people who constantly contradict themselves by being cozy, cute, open-minded, and irreverent. We even bewilder ourselves as we defend Dutch traditions while rebelling against them at the same time, a trait that was drilled into us by our parents with the old Dutch adage, "Oh, please do act normal. When you act normal, you're crazy enough." This kind of crazy can be found in the homes and lives featured here, from a chair wearing a jacket and baby lambs leaping around a historic house, to an outdoor bathtub on a barge and a chandelier made from Chinese soup spoons. Converted Dutch buildings like farms, barns, and garages may look conventional from the outside, but often embody complete anarchy on the inside, the good kind of anarchy, where the rules are challenged to find new, more sustainable ways of living. The homes in this book have been transformed into laboratories for modern lives. Most of the people work from home, which was further encouraged by the COVID-19 pandemic. Many admitted that the lockdowns didn't really impact the way they lived, but it did make them more creative and productive as they explored the new normal. In this small, overpopulated country, the effects of overconsumption, waste, and carbon footprint are on everyone's mind and inspire reusing and recycling materials rather than buying new. For instance, Rolf Brugging, see Waste Nothing on the page 1797-89, bought 2 adjacent buildings, a historic coach house and an abandoned barracks from the 1950s. He demolished the barrack and used all its salvage to create the interior of the coach house. While the Dutch are notoriously money conscious and thrifty, another contradiction lies in their natural sense of social justice. Those who think that capitalism and socialism cannot coexist need to look no further than the Netherlands, where altruism is as normal as riding a bike. There are no medals bestowed or red carpets rolled out for those who give back. In fact, public displays of virtue signaling are perceived as an embarrassment of riches. I too contradict my Dutch self by making this book. At age 18, I saw a bright future everywhere but in the Netherlands, and after I left Amsterdam, I did not look back. Instead, I lived in Paris and Australia before settling in London to study fashion design. I'd made my own clothes since I was 12, then made clothes for my friends, and eventually sold them at all local boutiques before I even graduated from high school. When I came across the work of French-Japanese designer Kenzo, I realized that being a fashion designer could actually be a career, one that happened in places like Paris, London, and Milan. I entered that world as a fashion model, earning the tuition I needed for studying in London. Along the way, I shaped my life with friends, boyfriends, homes, and eventually my own fashion company in London. In the late 1980s, I moved to New York, where I became director of design at Calvin Klein and created the CK collections. I got married, had 3 daughters, built 2 country homes, started more design companies, and was never homesick once. Only when I moved to Miami in 2009 did I begin to relate to the new wave of cutting-edge designers from the Netherlands, who were showcased at Art Basel Design Miami. Around the same time, the Dutch consulate featured my work with recycled beach plastic pollution in some of their presentations. They gave me an award for my contribution to the environment, and I worked with them on local education programs. Once again, I was speaking my native language daily. It took living in Florida for 9 years to make me feel Dutch again. My twins were in their final year of high school when we visited Amsterdam to celebrate my mother's 90th birthday. When they began fantasizing about studying in the Netherlands, I started seeing my birth country through their eyes. It was cozy, it was small, it felt safe. Teenagers seemed independent as they rode their bikes everywhere. My mother was funny and their home gezellig, and they discovered that they had an extended family of aunts, uncles, and several cute cousins their own age. A few months later, we drove around the Netherlands visiting colleges. We reveled in the landscape from quaint villages and historic inner cities to fields of tulips and modern wind turbines. We rented bicycles, drank endless mint teas, ate poffertjes, fries with mayo, and I made them try raw herring and Indonesian food. I showed them where I used to live, went to school, had my first kiss, and bought my fabrics. I taught them how to use the bike paths, trains, and trams, and how to say dankjewel, gezellig, and lekker. Not only did I see Dutch life in the 21st century through my daughter's eyes, but I also relived my own childhood. In a sense, I came home. So that's what motivated the book. And then I have some more photographs of my own homes, actually. This is where I live right now, the top 3. And then this one is where, to the far right, is where that's the first place we built in the country. My studio is in the lower left. This is where I'm sitting right now. This is me on location, shooting one of the houses. And this is the windmill that I spoke about, which was my father's wedding gift to my mother. And this is a very tiny me in the picture. And this is some art made by one of my daughters. So, and this is our living room. So now I didn't finish, okay. So my father was an architect who, after the devastation of World War II, specialized in social housing, and my mother was a photographer. Consequently, I became a very visual person, and I treated fashion design as architecture for the body. My early collections were inspired by London street style of the 1980s. And when I joined Calvin Klein in 1990, a professional young New Yorkers became a source of inspiration. When we moved to Miami, I took a break from fashion. Instead, Alistair, my husband, and I began publishing illustrated books, and I returned to the heritage of photography and architecture. Life came full circle when I realized that the way we live in the United States was not so different from the lives and homes in this book. Our Pennsylvania homestead, a 1790 farmhouse that I bought soon after coming to New York, is very gezellig. We too mix the old, new, and quirky found objects with heirlooms, art, and lots of books. We make art, grow food, and live thoughtfully in nature. As our family expanded, we built a modern edition and we run the publishing company from our studios here. Our lives are an open book as we share our home with family, friends, colleagues, and neighbors. And I'm grateful for the Dutch spirit of having nothing to hide. The ease with which Dutch people reveal their lives is perhaps best expressed by the absence of curtains in most Dutch homes. As a child, peeking into the homes in my neighborhood inspired dreams of my future. There was one place where a black cat always stared back at me from a simple white room with only a sewing machine on the dining table and a tailor's dummy in the corner. At home, our large living kitchen was level with the street. It had 3 big windows with deep windowsills where the milkman left our milk and yogurt. Neighbors would walk by and wave at us. Sometimes my mother would open the window and chat with a passing friend. My sister and I would play right outside, our mom watching as she cooked. For us, the lack of curtains meant a sense of connection to our neighborhood until a flasher was seen roaming our street and the vintage red striped curtains came out of storage. For several months, we hid from the outside world, and that was cozy too. So this thing of not having curtains is kind of a little bit how I did the book. Like we're looking inside people's homes, a little bit like voyeurs. So I'm not the kind of bookmaker, stylist, photographer who goes in and rearranges everything to create the perfect setup or scene. I like coming in and maybe tidying up a little bit, not to embarrass anyone, but very much leaving it the way people live there, as if you're looking through the curtains. This house is the house of Maat and Ina, and they live in Friesland, and they bought an old farm. And the theme really throughout the book is buying all these old historic homes that had a previous life with a completely different function, and then taking the form of your life and creating a new function within these spaces. So it's very much a personal expression of these people's lives and professions. Matt and Ina are designers, but they design everything from entire products to interior spaces, and they've done hotels, they've done stores, and they've done entire brands as well. And what struck me most about them, and it was one of the very first houses I photographed, was the way their farm is sat in the landscape in a very Dutch way. It is a very broad, wide open, flat, very flat, like as flat as the Zuiderzee and the North Sea, which are both, so they're both surrounded by. And the ground really, you can see that, you know, at some point it was either sea or it was swamp. It is that flat. And therefore the horizons are endless. And dotted with the modern windmills. Matt and Ina are, like a lot of people, very close to their community. And what I loved about them is that they did this one particular project with children. And I'm going to just read the paragraph that talks about that. We have a group of local kids who come and make art with us, Ina says. Matt goes on to show me how they created a new font that was painted by their studio babies, the children of friends and neighbors. We covered the wall with a large sheet of white paper and gave them paint rollers and black paint, Matt says. Then they painted the entire alphabet. They used these letters for the branding of Pickle de Winkel, a no-waste food concept, on everything from jars, bottles, and the flyers to the store window and website. So they worked with the local community to create a font. So it's very much, again, this feeling of community and private lives are almost running into each other and are one. And I found that a very particular Dutch thing that could be an inspiration really to anyone everywhere. I mean, it could even be an inspiration to Dutch people, but it really, I found that very comforting. And the last paragraph of this book tells about the man who lived in their house before, who he's called Seep. Seep, the original farmer of all the land that surrounds them, had retired to this cottage after his family moved away. Lore has it that on weekends, old Seep would sit at the end of his driveway and sell his potatoes to anyone who passed by. And that's literally in that little picture at the bottom, that's where he would sit. Apparently he didn't need to do it to make money. He did it to stay in touch with the locals who'd stop by and chat and buy his produce. And then Matt says, we now try to come up with similar ideas that keep us equally connected to the community. So that's kind of the inspiration point of this chapter, is this sense of staying connected to people around you and your community and your neighbors. And this is the rest of their beautiful home, very quirky little ideas of decorating. Beautiful kitchen. And this is one of my favorite spreads, because the how to avoid everything is nicely counterbalanced with Aina making her bed, not avoiding making her bed. And their outdoors is very romantic. It's a very romantic place. So this is Laura, and Laura lives on a boat, a ship in the A harbor with her husband, John Hanema. She bought this boat, this mooring, but a smaller boat, very early on. She bought it when she was 20, and that it came with the mooring on Borneo Island, which are the quays where Dutch ocean liners used to be docked. She says the previous owner, didn't like living there. It was kind of rough with salvage everywhere. But for Laura, then an art student at the Rietveld Academy, the abandoned oil drums, rusting anchors, bollards, and cleats were a source of inspiration. And for her graduate show, she collected the empty drums and canisters and cast their shapes in pastel-colored porcelain. I think all of you probably have seen these pieces. My teachers thought I was too wild, she laughs, but my vases ended up being published everywhere. So she's great. She's somebody that is inspired by reusing and recycling the everyday things around her, which started with obviously the oil drums. And there's some of those pictures, like the vase here is something she cast, I think, and then she uses this kind of lot of stuff from her ship. Also, she likes to use and uses as inspiration. This is the living room, which is full of her small quirky gestures. Her husband is John Hanema, who owns the Rijk of the Keizer, and also at the Rijk of the Keizer you can find her small design gestures in many places. Here are children who are very much part of her inspiration in her life. And her brother actually designed the interior of the ship. So I particularly like this little sea salt stand, which is an oyster from the restaurant and the foot of a broken glass. And she made a whole series of these in the restaurant, and they're like little salt dishes on the tables. This is a good example of how she reuses an element and puts different elements together. She also works with villagers in Africa to create jewelry. For a brand called Return to Sender, which I think in Netherlands is quite well known. Their bathroom and bedroom. And then this is the next house. Now this is one of my favorite houses, because architecturally and design-wise, it tries to break all the rules, or at least challenge all the rules. The home itself could be anything from a barn or a windmill, or it's a very kind of familiar Dutch shape, but they've worked with all the possibilities of what they were creating. They're both architects. Maarten is a traditional architect, and Yeti is an artist, and she's really the one that pushes for big change. We're changing traditional ideas. And the fact that they even managed to get 12 tree trunks, huge tree trunks, to hold up and be structural within this building is really a feat of engineering and design. And the fact that they have matting on the ceiling and concrete on the floor is kind of also turning everything a little bit upside down. When the space was completely empty and they didn't quite know how they were going to live in it and how they were going to put the furniture in it, they camped there in the middle of the winter in a snowstorm. They just brought tables and blow-up beds and lots of wine and cheese, and they just spent 24 hours there to see how the space felt. And I really like that idea also. And that's how they ended up in the back here. Looks like the living room, but actually it would be this kind of space, but it is actually their bedroom because it's just the two of them. And she said it was the nicest space in the house, and that's where we wanted to sleep and wake up, specifically wake up. This is a staircase going up with a bathroom underneath, which is a nice way to use space. This is how it sits in the dunes. So it sits on the Bergen beach in the dunes, in actually a nature preserve, a dune nature preserve. So it's very beautifully situated. The upstairs became a kind of workspace, but they've changed it all the time too. As they live in it, they change how they use the spaces. And this is what I love so much, because it looks like this is where the sofas, and they've kind of created a bed that looks like two twin sofas kind of pushed together. But it is in fact, and Yeti designed this, it is in fact her bed. Yeah, here you see it again. So this is a space I love a lot. It also happens to be in Bergen, which is where our windmill was. This is Elsa and Jeroen. Elsa and Jeroen were very early on a big inspiration to making the book. I followed her on Instagram, and they adopt or foster baby lambs, bottle lambs, every spring. Those are the lambs that are rejected by their mother sheep, and they need looking after. So they have them in the house. They race around the house, and they're allowed basically everywhere. The home itself, they bought from Jeroen's mother, who moved to the countryside. Jeroen grew up in this house. And when he was 15 years old, he noticed that there was a staircase. Yeah, these are cute, these little socks to stop the scraping sound on the stone. He noticed that there was a staircase in the house, which I'm not looking for. This is part of that staircase, upper left, right here. That was hidden, and they put a modern stair in, and he was fascinated by the old one, what it would have been. And his mum said, well, why don't you build a little model? So he built this tiny little model of it, and then went on to build the whole staircase. He was 15, and it was a beautiful, perfect example of a redone historic stairwell. So he got in the local papers and everything else. And ever since then, and he's now in his 40s, he's been building or rebuilding spiral staircases throughout the Netherlands. And he obviously builds other things too. He's built this beautiful, it's not a bedstee, but it's based on the traditional Dutch bedstee, but it's a bathstee. And this is the stairwell that he built in the hallway of their house. And this is a very Dutch page. And everywhere in his house sit models of little stairwells. And Elsa, I think I want to read the last bit of the story that tells you about Elsa. Elsa, who has a degree in social anthropology, became more aware of her buying habits after she worked in Pakistan and witnessed intense poverty and child labor firsthand. Now she only buys secondhand clothing and has rekindled the craft of mending. A beautiful repair is like creating a new layer of life, she says, as she shows me artful patches on worn-out jeans, rewoven fabric on a sofa that was attacked by the cat, repaired lace that was nibbled by lambs, and colorful embroideries on sweaters and socks. Every March, just before lambing season begins, she participates in Mend March, an Instagram community that shares creative mending ideas and encourages a more sustainable approach to fashion. I only ever buy what I truly love, Elsa says. Once it's mine, I want to keep it with me for a very long time. And I think that's a beautiful spirit to have around what we own, keeping it with us and loving it. Okay, so going on to the next house. This is the house of Claudy Jongstra, which everybody's probably pretty familiar with. It's interesting because you're not quite sure where she lives, because her life and her work are so integrated and there's so many people around her all the time that I feel that she has places where she sleeps, but everything else is just a live workspace, like to the max. That little bedroom is the bedroom of an intern, and the whole house and compound feels like that. And what's most commendable and maybe less known about Claudy is that she is incredibly involved in her local community, and everybody in the community participates in the harvest, and at the same time she has a program. She breaks bread every Wednesday, and people can come and buy it. She has a program for disabled children, challenged children in one of the barns. It is an art program that people from all over come to. So she's really not just her art and the way she creates her fibers and grows everything and dyes everything herself, but the way she shares, it's just organically shares her life and her work with her immediate surroundings is I find very inspiring. This is Petra's house. I'm going to take you through it. I think Petra really explained well what their life and their work is all about earlier today, and I'm probably running out of time, so I'm going to just show you their beautiful home, which used to be an old garage car repair shop. It's huge and very open and just endless treasure, room after room, treasure after treasure. Behind this beautiful wall recycled. Again, it's the feeling of reusing, recycling, collecting, and not buying too much new stuff. Petra will probably laugh because we added that fire to the fireplace. My daughter did. So yeah, more. The outside is beautiful. This is a good view of how the natural light was used at the time to repair the cars there. This is Valentin, who lives in a tiny little workers' cottage on the Maas and has just fixed up an enormous, the first concrete building in Maastricht, where he has his studios. He is a furniture designer that is not well known within the Netherlands and certainly not in the Eindhoven group. He's internationally very well known. He is very much into horticulture. His inspiration is generally very organic. The shape of his product is all rounded corners. When he bought this very basic little house, he rounded every corner, plastered it like a little bit like a Greek home. He at his new place, he even built a hortus. And again, at the new place, he's incredibly community-minded. And he is originally from Germany, and he speaks German and Dutch and English almost all at the same time. And his house is kind of an oasis, and he's created it as an oasis. His workspace is the opposite. I mean, I always feel that this space is a very feminine space, and where he lives with his wife and his child, and the workspace is incredibly masculine with guys in visors and heavyweight welding equipment and all that. His pieces go for $60,000-$70,000 each, and there's waiting lists of like 6 to 12 months. So he does very, very well. And his father built this fake colder for him when he was a child. And this is Helma. Helma is in Amsterdam. The space she's in, you wouldn't know it, but it used to be just sheetrock, bare space. And her and her husband love picking stuff up out of dumpsters, things that are left by the garbage. We all know how in Amsterdam there are special places where you can either pick where it gets picked up, or you can pick it up if it takes your fancy. And they built their whole house. This whole room was not there when they got this home. It is all recycled materials. None of it is new. Her husband Jeroen is a carpenter, and he rebuilt this, or he created this entire space with rebuilt materials. And then Helma is the collector. As you can see, she loves buying individual things and then creating one object out of them. So I have a better picture of this further along. But the curtains are made from her collection of ladies' silk scarves. And she's also a chef and has written a book. And she makes these poofs out of woolen blankets. These were windows that were brought in by a friend who knew that were in the attic somewhere. And this is more of that wonderful room. She has a collection of French ashtrays on that wall. She baked me a bundt cake when I came. And yeah, this is a good example of her collection of small Persian carpets, the pages that the dark brown cafes used to have on the tables. I don't know how many there are left that have that, but she bought them all up and made them into one large carpet, which is so awesome and so inspiring. Here you can see it again. And then this is the poof made of the blankets, and these are the labels that were on the blankets, and she put all those together in a quilt. This is one mirror made out of a lot of tiny mirrors, again, using the idea of multiple collections can make one large object. And this is the chandelier made out of her collection of Chinese soup spoons. This home is in Hamburg, which is an old arms and arms factory and warehouse right near Amsterdam. Nobody ever knew it was there. Super dangerous, I would have thought. And they finally decided to repurpose that whole place. So they didn't knock it down and put nice new sky rises on it, but they actually just refurbished all the buildings and then sold them to artists and other creative professions like designers. And there's a staging company there. And this is Chimke's property. Chimke bought a whole building and is a designer of furniture, industrial designer. She makes lamps that are dampen sound. And this is one of her very quirky, very Dutch designs, I feel. I mean, that sense of humor, that kind of something is what it is, but it is also something else, and it's out of scale, and it evokes kind of, you know, just a kind of a hey moment when you look at it. I think Dutch designers love that kind of thing. So her space, she kept it very raw. This is the whole building that she owns, and she's very inspired and works very well within that space. This is a rather traditional home, probably the most traditional home in the book. But what I liked about Lisbeth and Marco is how they just used very simple, authentic styling for the house. And then Lisbeth, at one point, this is Lisbeth, became, after her kids had left, became rather depressed and started painting and connected with a part of herself that she didn't know she had. And that's what I like about this house, that it is very much an expression of Lisbeth's love for creating tableaus in her house. Everything is perfectly organized, and then she goes and paints it. So the perfectly organizing aspect was really her former self. She always loved doing it, and fixing up the house was part of that. But then later in life, she realized that there was a second stage to that creating environments and making them look beautiful. And she started painting those tableaus. So like this is just a painting of what's underneath it. I don't have them all here, particularly like this, where the painting, you're not quite sure what you're looking at, and you feel that a lot. And then this is kind of, I mean, this is a close-up, but it sits at the end of a lane, so you see it in the distance and wonder what that cow is doing there. So she's very interesting. And then even this, you know, this could be one of her paintings. It's very integrated, and she found herself, her true calling later in life. This is a house I was talking about earlier, which is the old coach house that then had a barracks next to it. And Rolf knocked down the entire barracks and decided to use all the materials that came from the barracks for the interior, creating their home inside the old coach house, the historic coach house. So you can see kind of all these elements are recycled. It's you know, Piet and Eek has obviously also worked a lot with these kinds of windows, which are very Dutch, very 50s Dutch. But he also used the old radiators that were all around these windows in the old building, on the old barracks, and made a beautiful pattern out of it. This is all wood in the back here that is used horizontally instead of, I mean, flat rather than face out. And the table, he calls his sample card. It's what all the leftover materials, the legs he made the table legs from. He also likes using old books, and he uses a lot of existing materials and makes something else out of it. Cups, plastic cups. This is one of those feeding things for cattle. This is beautiful for the three structures. This is that aluminum that they use for lowered ceilings to put the ceiling tiles against. And then this is all recycled wood and the kind of a cardboard as well. And this is a huge glass pane, so it almost feels like you're sitting in the garden. Laura here, this picture was important for me because we see them, right? I mean, they're everywhere, all over the Netherlands. You see mothers with at least 2 children on their bikes, if not sometimes they're towing another 4 behind them. I mean, I think I've seen up to 10 children sharing the use of one bike and getting around that way. And that's how Dutch children live, right? They're born and they get on a bicycle when they are, what, 2, 3, 4 years old. I mean, their life is from the perspective of the bicycle. And I think the Dutch psyche is in some ways shaped by their life on the bicycle, because children have a sense of independence very early on. They start riding their first bike when they're 3. They start going to school on their bike when they're 6, 7, 8 years old, depending on where the school is. And by the time they're teenagers, they're fully independent. Their weekends are their own. They go hop on their bike. They see their friends. They go to parties. They don't have to wait for their parents to drive them around. My daughters were in the back of my car till they were 18 years old. So that sense of independence, I think, creates this sense of we can do anything. In the Dutch, and have a great sense of autonomy in the way they look at things and the way they live. So this home is a restored a station, and it's 2 old. It's the old with the new. So the new runs right through the old. And in the last photograph, you'll see how he's done it. And the light is beautiful. Jeroen is a designer, and Laura, his wife, works with him and does the kind of sales and PR. And they have 3 children. And again, the children are very integrated in their daily lives. And there you have it. It's like the railroad tracks run right through the station. Next house is, this is a tiny house, which by Dutch standards, I don't think it's a tiny house, but by American standards, it is a tiny house. Leah is an artist. She's an art teacher in Amsterdam and wanted a studio in the countryside where she could do her sculpture. And what she found was that with her budget, all she could get were these really kind of like workers' burgerhouses, we call them, which are like very basic, like, you know, houses with a front room, a back room, a kitchen, a bedroom, and a bathroom. And in those homes, there was no opportunity to be creative, to really have a studio. And then she learned about these Indigo houses. They're called by woon pioneers, which means living pioneers, and realized that with her budget, if she bought a nice little piece of land, she could actually afford to build one of those and have her studio and her living space taken care of and not have much other frills. So it's a very basic structure of the living room here. Upstairs is her bedroom, nice open space. And in the front room is her studio. And she had recently moved in when I photographed her. The stairwell, every stair is a drawer. So it's a beautiful use of space. And this is her bedroom with a wonderful view to nature. She really is like right in the middle of nature. And that's what and it came up earlier today as well. I mean, the Dutch love nature and they love living in nature and being in nature. And even when you're in the city, there is a lot of nature. At the same time, nature in the Netherlands is hardly the kind of nature the way we experience it. In America, I think in the Netherlands, every piece of nature, land, earth, has been touched, if not created, by the Dutch. I mean, I don't know what percentage, I think it's like 40% of the Netherlands or something like that, is used to be underwater and is reclaimed land. So there's a sense that you are in control of your immediate environment and of nature at all times. So you can really, again, do whatever it is you want because you're the boss. This is your land. It's inherent. In the United States, you can't be in nature that way because there are still, I mean, we have out here, we had a rattlesnake in our garden last summer. We have bears, we have, you know, it's still very much a separation between how we live and a certain respect for nature because it is untouched and it's wild. And I think that shapes character. Also the fact that we have so much space here Whereas the Dutch have limited space, again, creates very different ways of living and very different kinds of personalities. And there's the drawer in the stairwell, and then under the stair is the shower. And it's a little glowworm at night. And then this, everybody knows this house in Eindhoven. This is Kiki and Joost's house, which I ended with because it's just so superbly beautiful. So when people do the flicking and look at the book from the back, they see this first. Kiki and Joost are immensely creative and this is a house that they found when it was completely derelict. All that was left standing before they started building with the walls and everything inside they created. And then they went on to build another beautiful studio not far away, where they have they make all their amazing, their product designers, industrial designers, and they build everything and anything in a super inspired way. I think the way they live inspires the things they make. So again, it might not happen in this space, but I think the thought process very much happens by living in this space. And a lot of what's in this home has been designed by both of them or their friends. I mean, they like giving their work and then getting their work. So it's also a combination, kind of museum of all the work of their friends as well. There's just a quote I want to end with by Kiki that I thought was rather beautiful and probably quite inspiring. When I contacted the couple after the lockdown, Kiki wrote, "Actually, we've never had time for a real break before, like a kind of sabbatical. Of course, COVID is far from a blessing, but it has opened up new possibilities. As creators, designers, artists, we have it in us to come up with new solutions. This has been a time to rethink and be flexible. In a way, we've always lived like this, but now it's under a magnifying glass. This is reflected in our new work, which originated in the intimate home atmosphere during isolation and now manifests itself more freely than ever. We feel grateful for what we have." And I think feeling grateful for what we have is very much the mood of this book. And it's the mood that I think we all need to reach. We all need to end up in a state of just being grateful with what we have. We don't need more. It's all out there already. We don't need to buy more, to get more, we can work with what we have. If it's not interesting anymore, take it and make it more interesting. And that is what so many of these designers and these homes represent. It's an old home. You build a new space inside it, it becomes more interesting. And that is, I think, the new normal needs to include a lot of that way of thinking. This is the last page in the book. And I always like to say that this middle door opens up the pages of my next book. It's the door to my next book. And then we end up on this page. There are a few things I just want to end up with, which is that bookmaking and books itself are often said to be a dying industry, a dying object, something that is not going to exist in the future. And it is possible because books are financially unsustainable. They never make back, these kinds of books, they never make back what you put into them. I mean, I worked on them for 3 years, they're expensive to print. So it is a labor of love. And that labor of love is a language. And that language needs to be brought out there, but it's so much easier when you look at Instagram to get that fast image fix, right? And this is in a way an Instagram page, it's an image fix. But when you sit with a book like this and any of the other books you saw today, and you actually read what is also in the pictures, but there's more behind it, you slow down. And as you slow down and read these words, you give your brain an opportunity to come to conclusions that are not driven by need. They're not driven by, oh, I want that, or oh, she has better skin than I have, or oh, she's so much thinner, or oh, he drives a cool car, or oh, I have to get that watch, or oh, his life is so wonderful, or her life is so wonderful, which is what the instant reaction most of us get when you look at Instagram. A book does the opposite. It slows you down and allows you to be inspired and to think about what it is you're reading. It's a different part of your brain. So support books, buy books for presents this Christmas, because it can't die. We have to keep books alive. And we who make books, like Lee and all the other people today, we make books because we believe in books. We're in love with books, and we make our money elsewhere. Sometimes it is because we're making books. Obviously, it's a part of who we are. But the book itself needs to survive, and it needs to be supported. And I want to end with something a friend of mine who bought my book last week wrote to me this morning. She wrote, "The book has everything you suggest and more. I felt after closing it, you are riding a wave of paring down for a new moment in terms of present crisis we are facing as a planet. People need to let go of consumer mentality, learn to appreciate what they have, and reuse is mantra for the future. You have a guidebook as well as a style book. Wishing this book wings to fly." So that was a wonderful thing to get, especially this morning before I had to do this presentation. I hope you're all still with me. It's such a blind thing to be doing.
Yes, but, we are with you.
I can't even find you.
A lot of people listening, although it's been a very long day, and you have a lot of people admiring and loving the journey. I think you really managed to show from inside how the Dutch mentality has shaped living and housing and interior design and so on. I think there's a lot of secrets to be found in these pages, which you have to go over quick, but if you go more slow, you would, get a lot of ideas as well. It's a beautiful end of this day, which is filled with books. It was our first book club ever. And I think I'm so happy about it that we will do at least one book club a year, maybe from another country next year, another language. But it's a new way to invite speakers, just guided by what was published. And for us, it was a revelation, and it was very wonderful to add all the beautiful insights up one after the other. What was the most mentioned phrase is radical positioning, and I think that is something we can take away. And then there is beauty, which was also in Satish's introduction, such an important world. So yes, with radical beauty, I think we are going to change this world. And as always, but even more so after this anniversary issue, I feel a lot of hope. And thank you everybody who listened. Please stay with us, become our friend, give feedback to us. Next time, send a link to at least 10 of your friends. We want to grow our audiences. It's urgent to reach out more people. So I'm counting on all of you to promote the World Hope Forum and to participate and to connect. And then we're in for a beautiful future. We will be with you in November, possibly, hopefully from Finland. And that will be a holiday surprise. So thank you, Barbara, for this wonderful talk. And
thank you very much.
Thank everybody for their efforts. And